Boa tarde.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this bilateral event for Portuguese and Norwegian companies organized by eGrants, CEA Grants in Portugal. The objective is to disseminate opportunities of public financing in Portugal and bilateral investment opportunities between Portuguese and Norwegian companies. The idea is also to disseminate through the contributions of the Development and Cohesion Agency and the Recovery Portugal Task Force and the Agency for Foreign Investment and Trade of Portugal, the different public financing existing in Portugal and why there is reason to invest in Portugal. We also have the participation of Innovation Norway, which will present the financing opportunities in Norway. Then we will have matchmaking between the entities of the two countries, devoted to several topics: innovation, industry decarbonization, renewable energies, sustainable mobility, and digital transition. To kick off the opening session of this event, I will give the floor to the chairwoman of the Coordination and Regional Development Commission of Portugal and Tagus Valley, Teresa Almeida. Good afternoon, Secretary of State of Planning, Ambassador of Norway to Portugal, Coordinator of the grants, all those present here, all participants. Welcome. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to this venue of an entity, a regional entity that also manages funds. We are talking about a new cycle where we're facing challenges with different support strategies, may they be national or regional, with several financing instruments and investment, with different implementation timelines and varying co-financing rates. But it is a time to accelerate in responding to the crisis, still recovering with a new European outlook, with war, so with uncertainty. We have been facing European challenges that are also ours, and beyond innovation, we also have the challenge of resilience and sustainability. Sustainability with new topics such as climate change, green infrastructures, circular economy, topics of the future that we need to address as soon as possible and that also contribute to the activity and development of regions. We know the challenges and realities of the territories, but we have already some experience in terms of what can work or not. We need to make choices. We need to invest in new policies, new ways of making difference in responding to climate, environmental challenges, and to try to take advantage of the role of citizens in innovation, inclusion, and competitiveness. Develop in-depth policies in areas that already have proven results, but where we need acceleration, intensity, and namely when it comes to climate emergency. Finally, we have to develop policies for areas that require consolidation, stabilize networks, infrastructures, overlapping now with the new challenges of decentralization and digitization. We identify as guiding principles and starting points, aspects that can make our initiatives more robust. We need to act critically to promote the positioning of the regions when it comes to competitiveness and learning, where we learn our obligation of react to change, taking advantage of the lessons learned. In the region of Lisbon, this is the territory where I'm speaking from, where, of course, the focus of my concern is centered around. It's the capital city, and it has the role of convergence with Europe, and it benefits from a concentration of companies, of inhabitants, of labs, higher education institutions, decision-making centers. This region focus 43% of the expenditure in terms of innovation, research. So our investment is clear when we see the reality of the territory. We invest in innovation towards the competitiveness of institutions and companies in terms of what can be our international repositioning. We have at this time 50% of graduates before 30 and 34 years of age. We have followed the path of education and qualification, but we cannot forget that we also have a reality with serious internal asymmetries. And so we need to work together and coordinate our initiatives. For example, in disadvantaged areas of the region, and what we think can be truly great work to take advantage of opportunities. This depends on our institutional capacity, our coordination capacity to be tireless in our search for excellence. This is why this initiative is so important, to analyze all of the opportunities afforded to us by the public funds. Thank you. I will now give the floor to the coordinator of the National Unit of the the management of the financial mechanism of the European Economic Space, Susana Ramos. Good afternoon. I would like to greet everyone, namely the Secretary of State for Planning and the Ambassador of Norway to Portugal, with whom we have the pleasure of regular cooperate in a very constructive and dynamic context. I would also like to greet the Chairwoman of the Regional Coordination Development Committee of Lisbon and Tagus Valley, to whom I thank the use of this venue. I would also like to greet the chairman of the Recovery Portugal Task Force, the vice chairman for the Development and Coordination Agency, and also director of the Innovation Norway program, Magnar Odland, and also Annabella Raboso of Investment Management of the Foreign Investment and Trade in Portugal. I thank you all for being here. It is a great pleasure that in name of the National Unit of EA Grants that we welcome you to all of those who came to Lisbon to participate in this event. I would also like to thank the Portuguese companies present here. We acknowledge your work in your different sectors, so we're very pleased to see that you are interested in bilateral cooperation with Norway. For those that do not know, EA grants result from an agreement on the European Economic Area celebrated between the member states of the EU and 3 EFTA states, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, that through that agreement integrated the internal market of the EU. And we are now celebrating precisely the anniversary of this agreement. And so we created the financial mechanism of the European Economic Area, and known as EA Grant, and has 2 objectives: to reduce economic and social disparity within the European Economic Area and to strengthen bilateral relationships. Portugal and Greece have been benefited from EA grants since 1994, and the 5th financial mechanism is now being implemented. In Portugal, we have counted on essential support in priority sectors like blue growth, environmental protection, adaptation to climate change, and promotion of renewable energies, the strengthening of civil society, social and human development, and the protection of cultural heritage. Several projects have been financed with memorable results and with undeniable positive impact on people's lives. I, of course, will not be able to highlight all of the projects, projects. There are hundreds of them. But, for example, the financing for the construction of the Alameda subway station, the Old Ghettos project, new centralities implemented in Rabo de Peixe in Azores. It included social and physical interventions to solve different problems, monitoring the Nazaré region through Monicand, the renewal of the Montserrat Palace in Sintra, the project of the pilot power plant, geothermal power plant on the Terceira Island, the Climate Apt Local project through an important consortium involving academic institutions, NGO. It was able to empower 27 municipalities towards the development of their own strategies to adapt to climate change, and also several other programs and projects supporting NGOs. In the current financial framework, EA grants, Portugal is benefiting from an overall allocation of over 102 million, with also national co-financing, and devoted to blue growth, environment, culture, gender equality, civil society. There's also a fund for bilateral relationships. The idea is to support initiatives which contribute to the strengthening of relationships between Portugal, Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland. It is managed by the national unit, and it finances any area of bilateral cooperation. And so we are mid-implementation of this financial mechanism that has as deadline for the conclusion of its projects April of 2024, and overall closure in August 2025. And the blue growth and environment programs are particularly relevant, especially for your activities. There is a Blue Growth Program, Innovation in SMEs, and I take this opportunity to greet Sandra Silva. And this has particular importance within EA grants because it has the most significant financial allocation, but also because of its scope. So it supports blue economy with special focus on SMEs, but also research, innovation, education, vocational training within the maritime scope. And there is, of course, a strong interest on part also of Norway and Iceland, given the importance that the sea has in our countries. One of the partners is precisely Innovation Norway. Alongside Blue Growth Program, we also have the Environment Program. It is managed by the General Secretariat of Environment. It has as main objectives to fight climate change and promote a low-carbon economy, with a special focus on circular economy and also with the biodiversity conservation component. So today's event is about an initiative organized by EA Grants in cooperation with Norway's embassy in Portugal, Innovation Norway. On the one hand, we want to share the contribute of ADC and the Recovery Portugal Task Force and ASAP when it comes to different financing available in Portugal, and why choose our country to invest. And Innovation Norway will also present financing opportunities in Norway. On the other hand, we also be able to strengthen ties and relationships between Portuguese and Norwegian companies and leverage possible partnerships through the matchmaking session that we'll have afterwards. Besides the face-to-face matchmaking that we'll have here, given the interest that was expressed by different companies, we also have a B2 match platform that will be available in the next day to explore more business opportunities. Since it wasn't possible to cover all areas of bilateral interest, we selected Innovation Green Alliance, Industry Decarbonization, Hydrogen and Renewable Energies, sustainable mobility, digital transitions, and 4.0 companies. We want a very fruitful matchmaking for all companies that will indeed leverage future cooperation for both countries. Thank you for your attention.
Vai usar da palavra a senhora.
We will now give the floor to the Ambassador of Norway to Portugal, Tove Brove Questberg.
Está ligado? Sim? Yeah. Ok. Boa tarde a todos e todas. É grande prazer estar cá.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a big pleasure to be here to participate in this event, which is rather important. Dear Secretary of State for Planning, Eduardo Pinheiro, the President of the CCDR, Teresa Almeida, dear Head of National Focal Points of DEA Grants, Susana Ramos, dear Granmeier, coming from Norway, dear Vice President of ADC, Duarte Rodrigues, the Fernando Alfaiate, President of the Recuperar Portugal Task Force, dear Magna Roderin, dear Anabela Raposo, the Investment Manager at ICEP. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to speak in English to maintain the balance of languages.
From Portugal and Norway. Pleasure to be here today with you at this very exciting event in which we will share public financing and business opportunities for Norwegian and Portuguese companies in both our countries. And so much has already been said, but I'd like to underline and stress that we would wish to give our compliments to Innovation Norway and the National Focal Point with Susanna and Magnar and their teams for having done this great initiative and been able to mobilize so many participants. So congratulations and thank you. Also thank you as well to CCDR Lisboa Valdo for being our host and also giving valuable input to the background for this whole event. I would also like to express my appreciation to the Portuguese government, not least then by the Secretary of State, and also to the representatives of ICEP, ADNC, and PRR for their presence here today. It is also very exciting to have so many Portuguese companies here with us today, and we have more online, we know. I don't know, I didn't get all the numbers, but I guess we have a good number online, yeah? From larger companies to SMEs and startups. It is a clear example in the growing interest we've seen from Portuguese companies to develop business partnerships with Norwegian counterparts. And they come in all forms and sectors. We consider this as an increasingly, as a sign of an increasingly dynamic business environment in Portugal, taking the opportunity now with the funds available and seeing what new opportunities will come to the table. Okay. And particularly coming from the clusters present here today, most of which are in the vanguard of the European economy priorities and have a huge potential for internationalization. It is worth noting, and I think Susana Ramos touched on that some companies have already developed relations with Norwegian partners in the context of the projects supported by the EA grants. So they are already and certainly aware of their competitive advantages and what these partnerships and what the cooperation may represent. And so I welcome the Portuguese companies, but let me give a huge welcome, velkommen, to all of you that have traveled from Norway. I'm quite sure it wasn't very difficult to take that decision to go to Lisbon. We are very excited to see the interest to invest in Portugal from companies and business clusters in highly innovative sectors, such as hydrogen, ocean wind, solar power, carbon capture and storage, sustainable mobility, open ocean aquaculture, smart cities, green shipping, digital transition, to mention some. Norway is known as a pioneering nation, a highly digitized society with unique engineering competence forged from generations of experience mastering the ocean in extreme conditions. Norwegian companies are also leading sustainable transition in several different fields, like renewable energy, decarbonization, ocean mobility, and transport, based on advanced scientific research that has enabled many breakthroughs in health, nutrition, and biotech, just to name a few areas. Therefore, I'm sure you are eager to dig into what is on the table with the funds. So I'll stop there, but I wish you a very, very successful event and hope that you, wherever you go again after this day, you will leave with valuable input and contacts. And to wrap up this afternoon, I hope to see you all at the small reception, 7:30. Thank you.
Para encerrar a sessão de
And to close this opening session, we will now give the floor to the Secretary of State of Planning, Eduardo Pinheiro.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by greeting the Ambassador Tove Pruvik Vestberg. I hope I was able to pronounce your name correctly, the gentleman says. And I would like to thank her dearly for her close cooperation. I would also like to greet Susana Ramos and her team, the President of CCDR in Lisbon, Teresa Almeida, for hosting us and for the role you have had in using community funds for the benefit of this region. I'm sure that you are doing a very good use of those funds, and I would like to thank you and your team for this hard work. I would also like to thank the speakers of this session that are going to present lots of input and information, such as Duarte Rodrigues, Fernando Alfaiate, Anabela Raposo, and Magnar Hodelian, and it is with big enthusiasm that I'm here to participate on this opening session and this moment, this opportunity to take an overview about opportunities for investment that needs to be further fostered, especially with the establishment of partnerships between the companies in Portugal and companies in Norway. It is also my first public initiative within the scope of the EA grants where I have the pleasure of participating as the Secretary of State for Planning, and therefore I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Portuguese team and the Norwegian team on the work they have been developing, and I am fortunate in fact to be here to participate and continue to ensure its success. As I told you, I'm very happy to be here, and I would like, of course, to congratulate the Ambassador of Norway to Portugal for the fruitful work of cooperation in the last few years. After we are able to overcome, I don't know if I can say overcome, but I want to overcome these pandemics, and very soon also we will be able to overcome the war with all its challenges at humanitarian level, but also at a social and economic level. I would say that it is ever more important to continue to maintain this close work of cooperation, and we continue therefore to be highly committed together with Norway to continue this work, this good work. I would also like to greet the representatives of companies both from Portugal and Norway that are here. participating face-to-face or online, because this also shows that this is an important event and that there is a will, and when there is a will, there is a way to further our partnerships and diversify the markets. The relations between our countries have been taken for a long period. When we signed the first treaty in 1895, we assumed different objectives, highly ambitious objectives. And we need to continue to step up to these commitments on different areas: trade, bilateral trade. We signed with this treaty. We signed the establishment, the onset of our relations. In the beginning of this decade, Norway was the 16th country in the ranking of exports, and it's the 40th in terms of imports, especially on mineral, but also food production and machinery and textiles. And also in terms of imports, some fossil farming products, machinery and chemical products. So there is a lot of space, of room for us to continue to grow. And this is, of course, a very interesting perspective, brings interesting perspectives. And we can even include other countries as a third part of this triangle that we can work upon with Portuguese-speaking countries. And we've received many manifestations of interest from Portuguese-speaking countries in getting also involved in this type of cooperation, and it is an important role that we can, of course, perform. We will hear today about different examples and opportunities that are open to companies in both countries. But I would like now to underline the importance and the relevance of e-grants for Portugal. For about 3 decades, we have been able to have support to priority areas so that we can overcome some of the social and economic situations that we have, and also reinforcing, of course, the bilateral relations. In the current financial mechanism, there are areas that are covered and being financed, from blue growth, environment, reconciliation with active citizens, and also the sea and the environment. And they are extremely important for the event today, but also for the sustainable development of both countries. And they involve a high level of potential for further business. Through EA grants, Portugal has been contributing to the promotion and further development of innovation based on the sea and sea activities. Both countries are very concerned and interested in the sea, benefiting especially SMEs with the support to technology, science, research, and providing support to education and vocational training. But the sea is not only a priority area for Portugal, because it represents a natural area of cooperation between Portugal and some donor countries, namely Norway. We are in a similar context with common challenges, and we share an agenda for the oceans. The oceans need to gain. We've been talking about this for years, the potential and the importance of ocean, and I'm sure that the cooperation between our two countries is going to improve on that. Also, in terms of cooperation, the environment and sustainability is important, namely through the promotion of renewable energies. And I would like to underline that Portugal, on the one hand, was the first country to assume the objective of carbon neutrality, of achieving it in 2050. and we are now being followed by others, and we have a clear roadmap to attain that. In terms of the environment and all the challenges we have ahead of us in terms of sustainable mobility, we are in a good position. We ended 2019 being very optimistic. Then in 2020 we were also very optimistic, but then we suffered quite a lot with the pandemics, and it did not allow us to maintain that cruise speed that we've had. But nevertheless, this did not suspend the environmental crisis, so we need to continue to work for this purpose of defending the environment. On the other hand, energy transition is ever more a current problem for all of our societies. The energy dependency that we've known for so many years became even more clear after the conflict that we have been living with. So we know that there are many opportunities for the scientific and technology areas based on the Portuguese program, the Portuguese Recovery and Resilience Plan up to 2026, and 26 is so near. We have such a short period for such a program to be implemented, and it has a lot to do with digital transition, climate transition, and I'm sure that the president of the Recuperar Portugal Task Force will tell us about this. I'm sure that until the end of this decade, we will have millions of funds available from different areas with the pluriannual financing framework. The Portugal 2030 will bring 60 million euros to be invested in Portugal until the end of the decade. And this, of course, brings big challenges, but lots of opportunities. With the right investment, we will be able to succeed in the different reforms that we want to implement. And therefore, since our countries and the companies in our countries share these common objectives, this can only mean that we have very good perspectives for further developments. And it is clear and unarguable that we will be able to take further advantage of this. So please do not hesitate to look for the best opportunities in different areas, from raw materials to production, so that we can have a win-win situation. ICEP will surely tell you about why Portugal, why to invest in Portugal, and I'm sure that this will be able to stress out many of the opportunities that you can use in order to do so. And I'm sure that this event will contribute towards the reinforcement, the strengthening of our good relations, both in a formal and informal way, so that we can move together towards a bright future. And I'm sure that through the partnerships we will be establishing today, we will give yet another contribution to the success of the relationships between Portugal and Norway and beyond. Thank you.
irá agora usar da palavra.
We'll now give the floor to the Vice Chairman of the Development and Cohesion Agency, ADC. He has a presentation entitled The Competitiveness of Portugal and EU Funds, Results and Challenges. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the invitation addressed to me by EA Grants, represented here by Susana Ramos. I would like to greet the Secretary of State.
I will skip just with this global compliment. Meus colegas de mesa.
My colleagues of the panel. I will defraud a bit your expectations, because more than investment opportunities that will presented both by my colleague will address the RRP, I will talk a bit about the competitiveness of Portuguese economy in the last few years, because it's based on the results that we had in the last few years in facing of the challenges that the policies are developed. In the around 60 billion the Secretary of State mentioned have this backdrop. And so throughout these 15 minutes, I will very briefly address you on the main results and challenges and the 2030 Portugal strategy and the EU funds that we have available to us to strengthen our competitiveness in the next decade. I know that probably those at the back won't be able to see all the details of the slides clearly, but then I will share them. We're executing the 2020 programming period, the Portugal 2020. 31% of EU funds go directly to competitiveness and internationalization. There are other important areas, just as qualifications, direct investment, and also investment in the sustainability of resources. This has allowed in the last few years to have very palpable, specific results. More than 43,000 companies financed and supported, more than 1 billion in a program that was designed specifically for companies during the lockdown of the economy in the major challenge that we faced during the height of the pandemic. In terms of the execution rate in Portugal, we are doing well vis-a-vis the country when it comes to the really implementation of the funds. The objective of Portugal 2020 was to be the main source of financing within the EU strategy 2020. And now, in 2022, it's important to take stock. And it's quite positive. We see key indicators from EU 2020. I know that you can't see anything back there, but I will elaborate on this. In terms of school dropout, we had an impressive progress, probably the most impressive. I myself am searching for the figures here. The target was 10%. We had a major investment in qualification. This is absolutely essential for the competitiveness of the Portuguese economy. The inclusion in poverty indicators also achieved the targets. We fell short of the target in terms of the investment in research and development, and also when it comes to intensity in the intense investment in energy efficiency. We see here the qualifications of active population that's been improving quite a lot throughout the years. This was the main gap that we had, and it's still important for us. Portugal was a small economy, not very opened, but now we have still a small economy, but rather opened to foreign investment. This means that we've evolved from 20 to 40% of exports. The objective is to reach 50%. In terms of goods and services, we also had a positive outcome. In blue, we see the EU, in yellow, Portugal. This means that EU funds and business investment are very focused. And this is what this complicated graphic reflects. Maybe from Portugal 2020 or from previous programming periods like the NSRF, we see in blue focused more in low-intensity service and other sectors like primary sector, construction. So Portuguese investment financed by EU funds allow us to change the specialization profile and focus a lot on technology-intensive sectors. In terms of governance, we have evolved, and so we continue to invest in this. In terms of the regional competitiveness index, we are a small country, but we are very diverse, and so we have some regions which stand out. In Lisbon, we see that we have the higher rates, but it's also important to look at lagging regions and that are important for Portugal 2030 and the RRP, technology, business model modernization, and education. Despite the path that we have followed and what we already have achieved, we still have some way to go. The funds are constantly under scrutiny, and I'm going to give you a few examples of some of that scrutiny, some of that assessment. They have a very significant macroeconomic impact, especially in the long run, and that's quite important, and that's mostly about human capital and innovation. Financing for companies was very relevant. Companies know the system of EU funds quite well. But of course, it's not black and white in terms of the assessment. There is some way to go, some red tape to eliminate, and to also have more the diversity of regions, take it into account. But we have had very sound, robust financing systems focusing on innovation, productive innovation, and business model modernization for SMEs. And in fact, most of our companies are precisely SMEs, and so clusterization and other initiatives are essential to have scale. We need innovation, we need internationalization. Only innovating can we internationalize, but only internationalizing can I understand the innovation challenges that exist. So this has been really the paradigm that we have used and that we used also for Portugal 2030. We tested a new methodology to try and understand what business models are important. We did that through smart specialization, and this is about continuous learning, and so it will continue in Portugal 2030. And then also in terms of adult education and qualification, we still have a challenge here. It's important for national companies or companies with a branch here to understand the added value of this. So this is where we invested, where we had financing from EU funds. So what are the main challenges? Green transition, digital transition, demographics. I know that demographics is also important for Norway from the conversations that we have had. Globalization and technological transformation, regional disparities. And these are the major challenges that Portuguese economy, society faces. The crises that we faced were relevant, and in a sense, the challenges that we face were already included in the strategy that we had. But the two crises, the pandemic of COVID-19 and now this absolutely unbelievable warring context in Europe, did not underestimate or devalue the transitions. For example, the pandemic made us realize that the digital transition was necessary in the very short run. It was a very relevant adaptation, but we all need to understand how things are going to stabilize. We are far from really understanding the impact of remote working on our societies and economies, and how the territory is also occupied and used. And we also far from understanding the impact of that on urban, rural connections. It's curious that international companies that got to research on this were real estate funds, because this can be disruptive for cities. They are reaching the conclusion that it probably won't be as disruptive as thought, but it's still a very important areas. Then there were doubts on international dependency, on foreign dependency when it comes to energy, another aspect, and decarbonization, new energies is absolutely decisive. Portugal and Spain, for decades, tried to explain that there was an energy island that should not be an island, should have interconnections. I'm talking, of course, about the Iberian Peninsula. And when the tragedy of war started, the Council of Europe quickly realized that that was true and that needed to be addressed. Our strategy is quite clear. In the next decade, we want recovery and convergence with the EU, and we want Portugal to converge with the EU average, but while maintaining its levels of cohesion. We were able in the last few years to maintain the internal cohesion, but we were not converging with the EU average. And so for that, we defined 4 agendas, 4 strategic agenda. One focused on people, the challenges of demographics, of social exclusion, of the SNS resilience, and of course that was something that had to be reanalyzed amidst the pandemic. Realized that the resilience of the National Health Service was taken for granted, but then was tested to the limit. Then we have the issue of housing, also essential when it comes to equal opportunities. Then a second agenda focusing on the changes to the productive fabric in Portugal, the society of knowledge, digitization, qualification of resources. That is central to the competitiveness of the Portuguese economy, and of course the qualifications. Then a third agenda when it comes to climate transition, decarbonization. We are very exposed to climate risks. And then a fourth agenda has to do with the territory, to support for low-density areas, but also investment in terms of our Atlantic coastline and more integration within the Iberian market with cross-border cooperation. To face these challenges that are not even more overwhelming because we already have past experience. So we have around 60 billion. Here we just have around 52. And we see the breakdown here in terms of Portugal 2030, the Common Agricultural Policy, the REACT, which was also essential, and then the RRP. So these are the instruments that we have available to us and will double the annual investment on average. In 2021, Portugal had the best year in terms of execution of EU, already including the REACT, with around 2.7 billion in 2021. And the challenge that we have before us is to move to around an execution of 5 to 6 billion. In terms of RRP, I won't elaborate because my colleague friend will present precisely those opportunities. RRP and PT 2030 need to have complementary approaches. So we have, for example, decarbonation starts in RRP, then has a second stage in Portugal 2030. So they complement each other. It has the same strategic framework defined in 2020, back in 2020. And the Portugal 2030 that is now being negotiated, that will be closed by the end of this semester. A few remarks. We continue to invest in innovation and development in companies, and the modernization of business models. This within the context of smart specialization within each region. An important area that is not in the RRP but that is also important has to do with promoting broadband infrastructure in low-density areas. The pandemic shows that broadband is now an essential service. So it's important to have it everywhere, even where commercial operators don't have infrastructure yet. And then the major challenge that is decarbonization of our production fabric, so decarbonization of companies. We have a huge challenge so that companies understand that they have to change their approach when it comes to carbon, renewable energies, and then qualifications. I'm sorry if I took too much of your time and I didn't go into the specific details of the different sectors and the investment available, but my colleague will address the specificities of the Recovery and Resilience Plan. Thank you.
Para nos falar sobre o plano de recuperação.
Now to tell us about the plan, the Portuguese Recovery and Resilience Plan, we will give the floor to the President of the Recuperar Portugal Task Force, Fernando Alfaiate.
Muito boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start my presentation by thanking the invitation to be here and to have this opportunity of presenting the RRP on this important event of a bilateral event between Portuguese and Norwegian companies, old friends in terms of trade and bilateral relations. I would like to congratulate Susana Ramos on the organization of this event. Excellent, as we've been seeing so far. I'd also like to greet the Secretary of State for Planning and the President of CCDR Lisbon and the Ambassador of Norway to Portugal. And of course, also my colleagues here on this panel, the other speakers on this panel. My presentation is going to give you a certain context for the RRP, the Recovery and Resilience Plan, planned for our decade up to 2030. I'd like to start by mentioning some of the figures that were already mentioned in order to systematize my presentation, bearing in mind the area and what is covered by the Recovery and Resilience Plan regarding the complexity of the funds and the size of the available funds. If we bear in mind the pluriannual plan for the use of funds up to 2023 and the one that is beginning, we are talking about more than 60 Bs. And the RRP here takes a position that will represent around 16.6 Bs, or rather 26% of the total amount. And this, as my colleague Duarte mentioned, should be understood as an ecosystem with complementarity between the different funds and with a strategic interconnection based on the strategy of Portugal for 2030, including the different funds with the objective of implementing most of the projects with the available funds. Also, since we have a new mechanism established by the European Commission based on the need to have recovery mechanisms due to the pandemic situation, and I'm talking about the next generation funds, which include the recovery and resilience plans for the different countries, and also including an allocation of REACT EU, which was to cover quick pace intervention to solve financial problems for economies that were having some hindrances and blockages, and the situation need to be quickly solved. So this was the first use, the first application of this additional allocation from next generation, and now we need to have more structured investments that are able to provide the necessary continuity to the change of the specialization profile of the Portuguese economy and the need to implement reforms that are associated to investments following a strategic planning for the Portugal 2030 strategy. Therefore, the Recovery and Resilience Plan has a very important role to play with challenges in terms of its effectiveness and implementation when we compare its dimension, its size to the calendar, to the roadmap and schedules that we need to define. So in order to do this, we have organized the RRP in three main areas, three main structural areas. The first one concerned with resilience, the second with climate transition, and a third one with the digital transition. And there are 20 components that have been established for the RRP that you can see on the screen, representing 6.6 or accounting for 16.6 billions. 10.9 with grants, 13.9 with grants, and I'm sorry, but I cannot read the figure part with loans. And from here, you have 32 types of reforms or measures that are going to be included with different types of investments. And reforms and investments together are very innovative in terms of the programming period for the recovery and resilience plans, allowing for a better balance between the need to have a legislative framework that makes possible for structuring investments to occur. The final part of the slide you cannot see, it's cut, but there you see the different targets and the milestones that are necessary so that throughout time, every semester, we will be able to conclude the reimbursement requests from the European Commission. So this is based on results and not on expenditures, and therefore on the agreement signed with the European Commission, there are different milestones and targets that exist every 6 months for reimbursements to be requested, 341 of them, and you will see all the details in my presentation because I'm going to leave you a copy. In terms of the double transition or the twin transition, if you will, in terms of the environment and the climate objectives, on this first analysis, in terms of the climate objectives, the 20 components contribute in different percentages towards the different contributions that we want to obtain in terms of the climate objectives, representing or accounting for about 38%, and the minimum would be 37% according to the regulation of the European Commission. And therefore, you can see the different areas. And in addition to the strategic dimension of the climate transition, there is a set of other investments on different components that also contribute in a percentual manner with a specific share, such as energy efficiency on buildings, social housing, and other associated mechanisms such as the installation of renewable energies or other possibilities that can contribute towards the climate objective. The second part of the twin transition has to do with digitalization. It's something that is, of course, included in our recovery and resilience plan with the objective that 22% are associated to the digital objectives. And therefore, in addition to digital transition, there are other contributions from other components, namely in terms of resilience, that have a lower weight but will also contribute towards this objective of digital transition. Regarding business innovation, what initiatives can we talk about or present to you, and what are the type of investments connected to these type of direct contributions towards companies or for companies? It is evident in the diagnosis we carried out before the Recovery and Resilience Plan that there is an important role, a transformative role, not only in terms of reforms, but also investments in specific areas and fields. There is a set of measures that cover the three dimensions that I've just mentioned and are further detailed in a summarized manner on this slide. A measure connected to the mobilizing agendas, which include a green component, and which are divided in a more general component and another one that is more connected to climate change. There was a recent call with 64 applications that are being assessed in this area. And the objective is to promote a set of consortia that are able to have a structuring role to change the profile of specialization of the Portuguese economy in certain sectors, bringing together universities, technology centers, companies, cluster with a mobilizing consortium that is able to induce this into the market. This is a highly innovative project with high impact, expected impact in terms of the increase of exports, research and development, because this type of investments and new products and services are based, of course, on research and development, and therefore the transfer of technology and know-how from the universities to the companies is essential and of the utmost importance.
A transição digital e climática é.
It is also important to count on the contribution of circular economy, digitization in the production processes. So these are other areas that are highly valued. There is also a cross-cutting concern with the reduction of emissions, namely, of course, in terms of the industry. Another important measure that I would like to underline has to do with the capitalization of the companies. This is a financial instrument that is being implemented by the Portuguese Banco de Fomento with specific allocations with a total of 1,550 million, which will be able to contribute to reduce the deficit of companies in terms of capitalization, because we know this was an ever more significant problem under the pandemic context. Here we are talking about capitalization and not loans, and this will be used on small and medium companies, but also major companies. And there are specific sectors contributing towards the same objectives in terms of climate transition, digital transition, that will not which activity does not harm the environment. There are some sectors that are excluded, of course, because of the type of production they develop. Nevertheless, there is high potential and a financial envelope that is big for this objective to be attained. Main objective is to reduce the gap that we know that exists regarding the capitalization of companies. So the objective here is to reinforce their solvability so that they are better prepared for further investments in the future. There is one measure specifically connected to decarbonization and climate transition with complementarity with PT 2030, as Duarte mentioned earlier. And the call is now open for projects and applications. So the objective is, of course, to accelerate the transition towards carbon neutrality, reducing the emissions of carbon based on this need of protecting the environment so that companies in the future can have better production methods based on the action plans and strategic plans that have been established. In terms of sustainability, there are projects that are connected to bioeconomy, covering three main sectors: textile, footwear, and natural resin. Three sectors that can be especially important if they are able to become more competitive and have a sustainable transition towards bioeconomy. And these are extremely important sectors for our Portuguese economy in traditional terms. And therefore, this component shows that importance. There is also a component devoted to energy efficiency, not only in terms of buildings for housing purposes, but also services and central administration. It's an undergoing measure which is being implemented with very good acceptance, specifically in our context nowadays, because the price of energy is increasing significantly. In terms of renewable energies, investments on hydrogen and measures that are connected to energy transition, both in Madeira and the Azores archipelagos. As for digitalization, component 16 is devoted specifically to companies 4.0, with investments that can be developed in the empowerment of companies towards digitalization by providing the necessary training and education, as well as initiatives for startups to start their activities in this field. And how to be up to date with this information, I would like to recommend you that you see regularly our website, where you can see and find information on calls, public calls that are open, the different public tenders, present and past, according to the different components that are part of the Recovery and Resilience Plan. Also, you can subscribe our newsletter and activate the alerts for new calls and tenders that will be published in the future. Finally, I would like to tell you that in global terms, in terms of implementation, I would like to show you some figures. We finished the first stage that had to do with the contracts with a set of public entities for the implementation of the RRP investments. This was concluded recently, and therefore 69 public entities are responsible for the implementing the 139 sub-investments. Those contracts and agreements have been signed already, and 46% of the allocation available is or has been launched in 127 calls to select the companies or other beneficiaries. A component that has to do with public tenders was already launched. This covering almost 100% of the RRP launched in terms of applications. 26% of the projects have already been approved, and 3% of of them have already been paid up. So this is an overview regarding the implementation of investments. But as I've told you earlier, the implementation in terms of the RRP has more to do with the targets and the milestones, much more than on the payment side, the payment of expenditures. So in January, we received a request for payment that was submitted in January and is going to be addressed in May. So at the end of this semester, we will have a second request for payment with a set of targets and milestones according to what was previously established. So with the first payment that we will receive, we will have an account for 20% of the full amount. And we are following everything as established and planned. Thank you very much.
Vai usar da palavra.
I'll now give the floor to Anabela Raposo, Investment Manager of the Portuguese Agency for Foreign Investment and Trade in Portugal. And she will talk about why Portugal.
Senhor Secretário de Estado, Senhora Embaixadora, Senhora Presidente.
Secretary of State, Ambassador of Norway, Chairwoman CCDR for Lisbon and Tagus Valley. It is a pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank Susana Ramos for inviting me. My presentation will be a bit different from the previous ones. It's more directed at foreign investors, namely the Norwegian companies and entities present here. I work in the department that attracts precisely investment. I'm precisely investment manager. We have that area, also have the area that promotes exports. But within this area, our work has to do with not just look for opportunities for investment in Portugal, but also to position Portugal as an investment destination for other countries. And it is towards that we consider that EEA grants is extremely important, and other similar mechanisms, not just to disseminate these opportunities, but also to, on our part, foster and help in whatever way we can. First, I would like to start by addressing a bit the macroeconomic outlook in Portugal. This was already shared quite clearly in previous presentations. In terms of how the Portuguese economy has evolved, in terms of also its GDP, and it also reflects the economic stability of the country. Of course, there are still areas in which we have to innovate, do better, but we consider that we are on the right track. Regarding exports, we see here our main countries of destination of our exports. We see that we export mostly tourism, but alongside that, we also have heavy exporting of machinery, appliances, auto parts, and also metal and steel. And I think we have here some work to do in terms of we should have Norway on this ranking of top clients. In this specific area of foreign direct investment, we see here the countries that invest the most in Portugal and the countries in which Portuguese companies invest the most as well. We see that we have a lot of EU countries and then the United States as well. Here, our economic relations with Norway and it's more sound now, but there is still a lot to do and to develop in terms of these economic relations so that all these figures can be much more interesting in the future for both parties, of course. Now, the area that is really my focus. Although I believe I won't tell you anything new, because if Norwegian companies and entities are here, it's because they've done their homework and they already know why Portugal is a good place to invest. And it starts precisely with our location, our strategic location. We're not in the tail of Europe. No, we are set between the American continent and the rest of Europe. We have this in the same time zone as UK and Ireland. We just have an hour difference from Central European time. This is relevant when working internationally. And we also establish a bridge with Northern American, South American countries, and also Africa, also for historic reasons. We are considered by all countries and by all institutions as a stable country, a completely stable country when it comes from the political standpoint, but also at an economic level. Precisely what I was referring to. And these are issues that are now relevant when it comes to safety, and Portugal ranks 4th in a ranking counting with 163 countries. And given what we're seeing, not just in Ukraine, but in the surrounding countries that are being dramatically affected by the conflict, everyone is, of course, realizing that safety is very important to consider for future investments. And some investments that we already have in these countries that might be taking a hit. We are politically and socially stable. We also rank well in terms of infrastructure. Then there are other issues that are also quite relevant when it comes to data protection, cybersecurity. We turn on the TV and every day there is a new cyber attack on a company, and this is very important. And to consider this issue is now essential, and to invest in a country that ranks well in terms of cybersecurity is, of course, very important for any business plan of any investor for making a final decision. Then we also have a green location. This is nowadays also essential. Portugal is a destination to consider for all companies that deem this important. We're one of the first countries to be classified as coal-free. It's also very important to look at this figure here. 59% of the electricity consumption in Portugal is ensured by renewable sources. When someone presents a product produced in Portugal, they can use this as part of the product's DNA that is produced by resorting to renewable energies. We are open to investment, and this is said by OECD and consulting companies like Ernst & Young and Kearney. We're the second most opened country to foreign direct investment, according to OECD. Then we also have various competitive edges. Talent. And it's not just about the availability of the talent, but the quality of the talent pool. And that is reflected in the several rankings that you see here. And then so we rank 28th in terms of the global talent competitiveness amidst 134 countries. And we also have some quotes here, some statements from foreign investments besides the ranking. We see Springer Nature and PagerDuty. And one of the things that they mention is precisely the talent that exists still in Portugal, and the quality, talent, R&D, innovation. This is very important for the survival of any company, be it Portuguese or be it a large multinational. Innovation. Portugal is indeed an innovative country. We also rank well in terms of the different indexes, like, for example, the Global Innovation Index. And we also have some unicorns in Portugal. They are either Portuguese or have Portuguese DNA, and they're truly acknowledged not just in Portugal but throughout the world. And this is the result of the innovation that we have and the investment in this area. Another quote that we also like to share since it's from a world-renowned company present in Portugal for many years, which is Bosch. When they present new products, they say that the product was invented in Portugal, not just made in Portugal, but invented in Portugal. And in terms of infrastructures, as was also said before, we have good infrastructure. There has been a lot of investment in infrastructure that has paid off in terms of broadband and connectivity. It's important to understand where we stand, what infrastructures do we have, what can a company count on. 2 years ago, a bit more than 2 years ago, companies had the need to have all of their workers working from home. Some countries were able to deal with that, others did not. And in Portugal, it worked quite well. And during the height of the pandemic, many companies in Portugal, foreign companies, but also Portuguese companies in Portugal, besides ensuring all of their work, even with remote working, they also increased the number of people working for them and widened the scope of the tasks that were done from home. So they were able to ensure that daily activities would do even more and better. Now, in terms of the track record, some information regarding the latest investments, not all, just some highlights. Here, when it comes to business services, new arrivals, we have here major names, major brands. But what I wanted to highlight here is that Portugal is not just a country that is appealing for multinationals, but it is also seen as a country with capacity for these installed services, these services, added value services. Also in terms of the industrial sector, we try to divide here in terms of mergers and acquisitions, and the brownfield, greenfield. We have here some, of course, known companies, Northvolt and Galp. We also have Borg Warner. They already have 2 or 3 investments in Portugal. They produce auto parts, and that we hope that the matchmaking will also attract Norwegian companies to Portugal. We also had investments in the industrial area in Portugal, owned part of a French company. Trivandé are in Portugal working in real estate. Initially, they started in real estate, but then also invested in tourism, and they saw the qualities in the capacities in Portugal, and they're now invested also in production, doors, windows, shutters, window frames, and they will now be responsible for the creation of 200 jobs. What we also like to show at the end is something that is also quite important. And it's not about, at the end of the day, going for a drink at an esplanade, but it's about attracting talent that sometimes comes from abroad, and to have the necessary know-how to set up the company, to then convey to those who are left living here, to convey their know-how. And so this is a very important argument, quality of life. And for example, there was a case where the CEO was asked, do you prefer Portugal or Poland? And the answer was Portugal. Our agency is a one-stop shop. We work on attracting companies, on setting up and aftercare. And so why Portugal? All of the arguments here summarized to help make a decision. So when it comes to our talent, the fact that we are open to investment, we are a great location, the infrastructures, quality of life, and of course our agency as well to help you set up. Thank you.
Irá agora usar da palavra.
We will now give the floor to the director of the Innovation Norway program, Magnar Odelian, who will talk about business opportunities in Norway.
Dear Excellencies, dear all, thank you very much for attending this event. First of all, I would like to thank everyone involved in preparing this. It has been a lot of work in a short time, so this has been good. And particularly, I would like to thank Susana Ramos. She has been the driving force behind this event, and we have, as always, enjoyed a very, very good cooperation. So every time we ask the question to Susana whether something is possible, the answer is always the same: yes, sure. That's a really good sign and really good cooperation, so thank you for that. Thank you also to the previous speakers. You have given a very good overview of this plan, and the numbers are impressive, even hard to grasp, because it's a lot of money. So if we compare it then to the funding available from EEA grants, that's of course what you can call peanuts. But still, this event shows that even EEA grants can be used to facilitate something very important and useful beyond the financing of the specific projects. So we are excited about this event. This one is the first we have been involved in as regards to recovery plans. But we have got a lot of interest also from other national focal points, other program operators, other Norwegian embassies. What will you do in Lisbon? And they want reports back, because they will then see whether something similar can be done in other countries. So, of course, we have now learned also that there is some kind of imbalance between the export-import statistics between Portugal and Norway. We hope that increased cooperation can then kind of balance that a little bit more. But on the other hand, we will not sacrifice the Portuguese tourist destinations or the excellent Portuguese wine. We will not do that just for balancing the export-import statistics. That's for sure. I'm supposed to say something about business opportunities in Norway, and I will do that, but in a very general way, because you will meet during the B2B meetings after Norwegian entities that represents some of the key sectors in Norway, also key opportunities for cooperation with Portuguese entities. So I will focus a little bit on then the business support, how we help Norwegian businesses, and how that can also help them to be better prepared for international cooperation. And I will even say a few words about investing in Norway, because believe it or not, that is also possible. So I will say a few words about that as well. Is this working? Yeah. Innovation Norway is a government agency. We have a lot of roles, but the most important roles for this context is that we are an innovation agency. That means that we finance innovation projects, research development, and then preferably then close to the market. We are not a research agency, but we are an innovation agency. So we finance development of products and services close to the market in Norwegian companies. But that, of course, also helped then the Norwegian companies to then have international activities. For instance, be prepared to taking part in EEA Norway grants projects, to be prepared to take part in funding projects funded by European programs, such as Horizon Europe, which is a big priority for Innovation Norway. So that is one part of it. And it's also that Innovation Norway is a bank. Actually, we have a banking license as well. And we now more and more like to call ourselves a green bank. And that is because we finance more and more, or a bigger share of the project financed by Innovation Norway, also from the loan schemes, they are green projects. That is a very, very important criteria for getting funding from Innovation Norway. So you can see that share is increasing year by year. That's what we will then define as, based on specific criteria, define as green projects. And we are also, like ISEP, a trade promotion organization. So that means that we have the responsibility to promote Norwegian companies abroad, and also to promote Norwegian solutions. And I'll come back to that a little bit, because we focus a lot on the promotion of green Norwegian solutions. And that will fit very much into many of the priority areas mentioned here today. Just to show you that we are kind of a mix of a regional development agency and a trade promotion agency. That means that we have offices all over Norway, and we have a lot of offices abroad. Unfortunately, not an office in Portugal, but we have our Madrid office that is responsible also for the activities in Portugal. And of course, the last few years, we have also used EEA grants as a vehicle for that kind of cooperation, because Innovation Norway is a donor program partner, as we call it in the EEA grants, for 2 programs in Portugal. That is the Blue Growth program and the Environment program. And I can see that both, also Susanna behind her mask there, and Sandra, from the program operators in the programs we work with. So that is really good. So EA grants has been a really good vehicle also for Innovation Norway and to help Norwegian companies. Yeah, we are a little bit behind schedule, so I will try to be brief so that we will also have time for some questions and answer. But of course, that is kind of the philosophy when we then look at the financing of projects. We see the innovation potential, we see that is high quality investments, and that is a high potential opportunities for market and so on. And then we offer financing, competence, network, and positioning to the Norwegian companies. Some key figures. They are boring, but just to give you then the overview of Innovation Norway. 720 employees all over the world, 19 offices in Norway, 28 international offices. The surveys that tell that companies working with Innovation Norway, they do better than other companies in Norway. And you can see also the figures for loans and grants. They are rather high. If you then divide it with 10, then you will have the euro number for this. Okay, you have some Norwegian key industries. You can see it there, and you will find representatives for most of them present here today. So of course you can see then things related to energy is important, and based on the events the last few months, it will be even more important. The focus on energy supply and energy security will be much more. And in our opinion, Norwegian companies, they have a lot they can contribute with there. And we have representatives here today, both on offshore wind and hydrogen, and even also on green shipping and batteries. And we have also circular economy. So you can see that most of the key industry sectors that we work with in Innovation Norway, you will find them here today. And I know that many of you will meet each other after, so I will not go deeply into each and one of the sectors, since we are kind of short of time, and we will need some time for questions. But I will mention Invest in Norway, since we got a very interesting presentation of Invest in Portugal from ISEP. We have given more priority to work also on attracting investment to Norway the last few years compared to what we used to do before. We also have some arguments, not only ISEP, that have some arguments for why you should invest. So we asked the question, of course, say why Norway, not why Portugal. And that is, if you look at Norway, according to then different surveys, then about 1/4 of the value creation in Norway is created through international cooperation. So that is a really important aspect of it. And of course, if you look at then the recovery plans and see then the total amount of money that will be available to projects throughout Europe, no country will be able to do that alone. They will only be able to do that in a good way with cooperation. Not, of course, only cooperation with Norway, but then a cooperation across Europe. So international cooperation as a platform for value creation is a very important part also of why you should invest in Norway. And of course, Norway has a leading position in the ocean economy. So Oslo Stock Exchange is the largest shipping exchange in Europe. So this is a really important part of the Norwegian economy, and also then an argument for investment. And then, as Portugal, a stable economy makes safe investments. And we would like also to underline, of course, we have talked about EEA grants, but the EEA grants is again based on the EEA agreement. And that is the agreement that links Norway to the internal market and the European Union. Because you all probably know that Norway is not a member of the European Union, but we have the same regulatory framework. So you, as a company, if you invest in Norway or even take part in trade activities with Norway, you will always know that it will be based on the same regulatory framework. It's based on the regulatory framework from Brussels. And that is also the case for Norway, because more or less all relevant legislation for the internal market is also part of the EEA agreement and implemented also in Norway. Some people in Norway, they say that we are even better to implement the EU legislation than most of the EU member states. We are more Catholic than the Pope, they say. So whether that's true or not, that we could have a lengthy discussion on, but that some people like to say that. I'm not sure if it's true, but still. But the stable economy in Norway is a point for an investment in Norway. Last, I would like to also very, very few words about how we then pioneer sustainability and together. We have used a lot of resources in Norway to promote a green Norwegian solution. So we have a platform for that called Explorer. It should be a movie, but I sent a PDF, so I can't show the movie. This is only a picture of an electrical ferry. But we have the Explorer is a platform that is a showcase of Norwegian green solutions. And if you go into the Explorer, you can now find almost 500, I think, different vetted Norwegian green solutions. So if you are looking for a partner in Norway for a specific project related to something green, you should look at the Explorer. because there you will find the description and the contact details and everything to companies that could support with green solutions. So when we have both matchmakings or try to find partners for companies under EEA and Norway grants, we always use the Explorer, because you will know when you find a solution at Explorer that this is not some kind of strange thing. This is serious, and it has been considered and vetted by experts. So you can't just say that I would like to go to and be a part of Explorer. You will have to qualify to be that. I think I'll then just say good luck to all of you with the meetings you will have after, and we will be eager to monitor the result of this and see whether this is something we can do also not only in other countries, but perhaps also do more in Portugal on even more specific areas. If we find then after this today that, okay, we should look even closer into offshore wind, or we should look even closer into something else, I think that the EEA grants could still be a platform for doing that as well. So best of luck to all of you, and thank you very much.
Teremos agora início a período de perguntas.
We will now have a Q&A session.
Já está? Pronto. Isso. Confirma-se. Pergunta então se há alguma questão.
Are there any questions from the audience? I imagine that you're all very anxious to move on to the matchmaking portion of our event. We will share the presentations afterwards, as was mentioned. There being no questions, I would like to thank you all for being here and thank all of the speakers. I'm sure that the information shared will be extremely useful both for Portuguese and Norwegian companies. We will have right away a coffee break on the 9th floor, and then we will have the matchmaking. We'll have 18 matchmaking tables, 6 for business innovation on the 9th floor, 3 tables for industry decarbonization, 4 tables for hydrogen in renewable energies, and Innovation Norway will also have a table. All of these will be on the 9th floor. Then one table for digital transition and 4.0 companies, also on the 9th floor, and 3 tables for sustainable mobility here on this floor. All Portuguese entities will have the opportunity to meet with Norwegian entities within each thematic area, and a minimum allocated time of 15 minutes. The matches were previously defined, but if you don't know your time slot or your table, please address one of my colleagues to clarify that. I would like to thank Maria Mineiro, Rita Soares, Ricardo Perdigão, Filipe Rodrigues, and Mónica Angel. If you have any issues or any questions, you can also ask them. Besides today's matchmaking, we also have one available online the next 2 days, and that allows us to include all interested companies. I know that many of the companies present here have already registered, but there are other companies that are not here, but that have registered online for the online matchmaking. And you can match in other thematic areas. When the matchmaking ends, you're all invited by the ambassador for a cocktail at the conference center at the Kunstszene Palace in Hotel Tivoli. Thank you so much for being here, and I wish you good matches.